opportunity to come talk to you about some of my favorite conversation pieces, which is the Constitution and the Word of God. Two things I carry around with me every day. You will never find Martin Smith anywhere without these two things in his hand. This is the Constitution. There, I'm a little bit taller, there you go. Constitution of the United States of America, as well as the Constitution of this state, the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Why is these things so important to us? This tells you how you got here. This tells you what you can do when you get here, while you're here. Right? And what you can do is, when things aren't exactly the way that you think they ought to be, this is injustice that you described. That's the opposite of freedom. When you run into those opportunities as a free person, you realize that not everybody's an American. Are y'all? Raise your hand if you're an American. Yeah, not Republican, not a Democrat, not a this, not a that. You are an American, and this, because you are American, says that you have constitutional protections and privileges and rights. I remember in 1988, I swore my oath to protect that Constitution. And I went overseas, and I got to spend some really amazing times in self-reflection about what that actually means. And come back home and realize that I was a damaged person because of that experience. And I realized there was a lot of my brothers and shipmates and those who served with me who were equally as damaged as I was. And I started thinking about, I grew up in the Ozark Mountains, and my daddy still today makes plant medicine out of everything you can think of in the woods. From mullein to rose hips, he's making some kind of medicine for our community. So I was around plant medicine my whole life. I ran across a 1998 discovery in Israel that was the endocannabinoid system. And that system told me that God created a molecule in a cannabis plant that was going to be beneficial to me. And what that benefit was is to create homeostasis, means balance in the body. I was able to create that for me. And I'm thinking to myself, me and everybody else who's ever dealt with PTSD, me and everybody else who's ever dealt with chronic pain, me and everybody else, and the list goes on and on and on. But what's the barrier? So that's when I started my journey. I started my journey at the federal level, trying to get government procurement into incarcerated veterans who are dealing with PTSD as a way to have access to someone who's incarcerated, who's willing to try it, so that for his, same as me, for my brothers and sisters and those who suffered, would have access to the knowledge of what was been discovered in Israel with the endocannabinoid system in 1992. Each and every one of you are making cannabinoids. I started that journey thinking, how do we get there? What's the barriers? And the barriers were, you go to jail for it. You got possession of it, you go to jail for it. If you grow it, you go to jail for it. If you traffic it, you go to jail for it. That was my barrier. That's what, you can't procure something that people go to jail for. You can't procure something that people would maybe influence a drug cartel or something, bring money into that. So we had to start breaking down all kinds of barriers, and that's where my journey started. In 2002, Ron Paul, not Rand, but Rand's dad, introduced a definition into the legislature at federal level for industrial hemp. Would legalize it at the federal level, define it really. Hemp is just a word, you know that, right? Marijuana is just a word, you know that, right? Those are words that are defined in law, right? But I define it this way. God said He gave all the herbs for the healing of the nations. And because I am equally endowed, what's in that endowment? You ever ask yourself, what is in that equal endowment? Cannabis is in that endowment. God gave you cannabis. And He told me, I had trouble. I pastored for many years. And trust me, I tell you, I've been at the pulpit just like this, telling people, stay away from the devil's lettuce. And then God spoke to me one day when I was asking about why He keeps changing my paradigm. And He said, why are you demonizing something I said was good? Didn't I tell you it was good in the beginning? I said, yeah. He said, then go find the good in it. And that's where I started my journey. I was in the pulpit, got out of the pulpit, and started, instead of writing sermons, I started writing legislation. And that legislation as a citizen advocate for my sovereignty, given to me by the Constitution, to have access to an endowment that God created for me, to heal me, Martin Smith, one nation. I'm one nation unto God. I have that right to have that healing because God gave it to me as a part of my constitutional endowment. That's an unarguable fact. And there's not a legislative body in the country that can argue your constitutional access to that endowment. With that, I want to empower you to do as I did. I didn't do anything different. I stopped writing sermons, started writing legislation, started talking to legislatures, figured out what their barriers were, and figured out how I could help them get past their barriers. Sometimes we think they're against us, but really they just don't know how to help us. I say, let's tell them how to help us. Patrick, thank you so much for... Patrick, 2 years ago, said, Martin, I'm going to fight the decrimination. I'm going to fight for decrimination. I'm going to fight for access. I'm going to fight for access. I'm going to fight for the medical protections for the patient, for the medical protections for the doctors, for the medical protections for the pharmacists, for the medical protections for the producer. That's what I'm going to do. And he said, I'm going to fight to decriminalize it. This is his effort. Would y'all give him a round of applause for his effort? I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but I can tell you right now, it's worth fighting for. That's what I learned when I went overseas, and we got hit by a super tanker coming out of the Straits of Morocco, coming out of the Persian Gulf, and I was miles away from home, sinking in the ship. You know what I realized? There's no greater power than unity. Those 360 men came together like I ain't ever seen the men come together, and we kept that ship alive. And I realized right then how important freedom is. God bless you, and God bless the Commonwealth of Kentucky.